Welcome back to a little FCS championship edition of the Big Sky Now weekly media panel. The Montana Grizzlies will be representing the Big Sky in the FCS title game January 7th in Frisco, Texas, taking on the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. So we'll definitely be getting to that today a little bit. Joining us on the panel, Mark Nelke of the Coeur d'Alene Press and Fritz Neighbor of the Daily Interlake. I'm Josh Dugan. Let's just dive into this thing. We'll get to our performance of the week. We'll recap a little bit about the Griz North Dakota State game, and then we'll move into some championship game talk and maybe a little transfer portal action. So lots to digest there, but lots on the radar. Talking football late in December, so can't complain. So performance of the week, why don't we start it out with you, Mark, and go from there?
Okay. Well, I'm guessing you guys have some Montana people you're going to highlight. So I don't duplicate it. I'm going to highlight the 26,544 fans who filled that stadium. I know it's hard in the playoffs because you have to rebuy the tickets. They're not like season tickets, so you got to buy the tickets again. But I think that says a lot about one, Montana fans, two, regional fans, because I know looking at social media, there were quite a few people from our neck of the woods that made the 2 or 3 hour drive over there. It helped. It was a nice day, relatively for December. It wasn't like, driving home in a blizzard from Moscow like I had to do a week or so ago. So a lot of things came together and very impressive for Montana and the fans to fill that thing. And obviously, Fritz can speak to what the impact that crowd had on North Dakota State.
Yeah, well said, Mark. That was an absolutely electric crowd. I think there was one phase there was 4 plays and 3 of them were false starts by the Bison. You don't see that every day. So no, they definitely had an impact. How about you, Fritz, performance of the week? And then any thoughts on the crowd being down there and all that?
Yeah, I like what Mark said. It's tempting to agree with them, and we'll get back to that. I have to go with Junior Bergen. Again, I think I did it last week too, but his punt return could have sealed the game. They missed the PAT after, so it didn't. Then he scored a touchdown on a 22-yard catch and run in the first overtime, and then to cap off the second overtime, he made a great play on an option pass, shook off his face mask getting grabbed and fired a bullet. They got tipped, but somehow got to Keelan White, who made a great catch. And so I got to go with Junior again. That's his 5th career punt return for a touchdown. Ties the Big Sky record by Montana State great Corey Smith, who I saw play. I'm that old. He played for the Cats from 2001 to 03 and had a kickoff return to beat the Griz that year, I remember, in 03. So Bergen's my guy. I guess number 2 would be the crowd. There was a big kind of a controversy brewing because they wanted to put all the leftover tickets on sale on Wednesday at 5. And it seemed like by 5:02 they were all gone. And then they almost instantly were showing up on those secondary outlets for a much inflated price. Turned out there's only 3,000 tickets really left over. And so there's no real mystery why they went as fast. It's hard to prevent the SeatGeeks and the other secondary outlets of the world from getting their hands on stuff. I didn't really expect on Wednesday that I would see a crowd like that, but it was a sold out crowd. And it seemed someone I was talking to today, it seemed like it got bigger as the game went on in the second half, because I think they left the gates open and people just started showing up and lining the causeways behind the Grizzlies scoreboard. So the official count was 25,644, I believe. Probably more than that by the end, because everybody wanted to see a little piece of it, But yeah, Bergen's number 1, crowd's number 2.
Hard to argue that. I'm just going to piggyback off that for sure. I'm going Junior Bergen as well. It was obvious, but human highlight reel type of player. Every play he touches the ball, you never know what's going to happen. And they always say in the biggest games, the biggest moments, you need your best players to make plays. He's done that 2 weeks in a row. He's really pushed this team into the national title game. So got to give all the credit to Junior Bergen. It's a team effort. You got to have all 11 guys chipping in. But when you look back at this run, it'll be hard not to say they're about to put a Junior Bergen statue up at Washington Grizzlies. No, I'm kidding. But he's been unreal. And, yeah, the crowd, I saw that all over Twitter, Fritz, all the ticket controversy. And, it makes sense. Like you said, not a lot of action. But, hey, fans showed up when it mattered, and that's what's important. So, we'll just kind of dive into the reaction and takeaways from Montana's win over North Dakota State. Anybody who didn't see that one, go rewatch it because it's one of the all-time classics for FCS semifinals. Crazy game. Fritz, we'll start out with you, just kind of reaction takeaways from the win, and then we'll kind of move along from there.
Well, I had a little bit of deja vu because for the second straight week, they couldn't quite get that second score on the board to prevent overtime. And then, NDSU marched right down. The Griz didn't have a penalty all game until NDSU faked that punt. And then they got a late hit out of bounds. And all of a sudden, they're 33 yards upfield and into Montana territory. Just another great game at Wa Griz, probably in the top 5, probably on the Mount Rushmore. I was covering the team in 2009 when they, in back-to-back weeks, scored 41 straight points to beat South Dakota State, that team. And then the next week, Appalachian State came in with Armonte Edwards. And it was one of those games like the Delaware game where it started on a beautiful fall day and ended in this case, about 3 or 4 inches of snow. And it came down to right at the final buzzer, a fourth down pass that somehow went incomplete. Armonte was money that day, thrown into tight windows, but the Griz were able to prevail 24-17. So there's 2 off the top of my head that are right up there with what I saw Saturday night. Just a phenomenal game, great atmosphere. And I think the Bison fans and players appreciated it just almost as much as Griz players and fans did.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Bison players on Twitter being quoted as giving nothing but praise for the atmosphere and the fan base. Definitely was pure electricity. Mark, your reaction to that one, any takeaways from that game?
Yeah, I guess my first reaction was Montana ran a better trick play on their 2-point conversion than North Dakota State, or at least they were more fortunate. I mean, you can't really take credit for a deflected 2-point conversion pass. I mean, it was kind of lucky that it got off that guy's hand and right to the receiver they were throwing it to, or whoever he was throwing it to. Was that who he was throwing it to? So
it was.
And it got to him. So that could have been knocked down, and that would have changed a whole lot of things. And then North Dakota State's kind of looked doomed from the beginning. The Montana had a good rush on him there at the end, and he just kind of, I don't know what he was doing. He threw it into the end zone right to a Montana guy. So it didn't really have a chance.
I was, if I can just jump in real quick, Josh.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was interesting. On the post-game radio show, Bobby mentioned this, and I didn't realize at the time. Post-game in the press conference, Matt Entz said, it's a play we hadn't used all year, so we liked it. In Bobby's interview post-game with the radio crew, he said, not only had we seen that play, we adapted it, and we call it Bison. So they knew when they lined up in that swinging gate what was going to happen, and they're all over it. There was also a lot of contact in the end zone with the intended receiver. He was nowhere near the ball where the ball showed up. I think he didn't really shy away from contact himself, but good teams make their own breaks, I guess. In that case, Montana made a couple more plays at the end.
Yeah, I was about to say, just one of those games, you always hear it in the playoffs, but who can make one more big play? The Griz made the one more big play. I heard Mark say, it's kind of doomed from the start. As soon as they came out in that play call, I couldn't help but think that's something, you're running when you're playing freshman football. I'm like, are they really running this right now? The Bison just pounded the rock for back-to-back touchdowns on the ground in OT. Don't run the power right there. I couldn't believe it. I kind of felt like the same thing, kind of doomed from the start. Very questionable play call. Easy to look back and say that now. And yeah, the ball bounced, literally it bounced the Grizzlies' way, bounced right into the hands of Keelan White and sent them to the national championship game. So really it just had been that kind of year for Montana down the stretch. They were rolling and it bounced the right way at the right time. They got the break. I will say one key stat from that game, I thought Montana held Cam Miller, most accurate passer in the nation, at 9 of 22 passing, just never looked comfortable. And that was kind of a big key also. Really, the Montana defense didn't get a ton of talk about because there was so much crazy stuff going on in that game, but they played a heck of a game, kept Miller under pressure. He made some great throws early, and then they kind of had him settled down. So, and Fritz and you both, I believe, mentioned, or at least Fritz did, but that North Dakota State punt, fake punt, I really thought the momentum was on their side after that. They looked like they had a chance to steal it, and it just didn't go their way. That was a gutsy play that if they would have won that game, Griz fans would not have forgot for a long time. But luckily, we didn't have to have that conversation. But overall, just like you said, Fritz, one of the best games for sure at Washington Grizzly. being caught in the moment, but I was like, God, that's one of the best 10 games in sports I've watched in a long time. I mean, you don't see a lot of those tight games. It comes down to a final play, just an epic ball game. But moving along, I did want to ask you guys just a little bit with a number of key Big Sky players hitting the transfer portal, multiple guys from Montana State, key offensive linemen. Idaho, we talked about last week, Javani McCoy and Anthony Woods are on their way out of town likely. I did want to get your guys' thoughts on the transfer portal just real quick before we move along, just kind of the state of the portal and any potential changes that could be made. We'll start with you, Mark, and then we'll move along a little more to the championship action.
Yeah, well, so far anyway, Idaho's the one that's gotten ravaged the most. I mean, you mentioned McCoy and Woods, Marcus Harris, Trainer, Ormani Arnold. So Harris and Arnold being cornerbacks, and Mervyn Kenyon, a defensive back, and one of their offensive linemen is in the portal. Two of them have already committed, Marcus Harris to Cal, Ormani Arnold to Cincinnati. So, I mean, that's, as fans, you don't like it. You like to see your guys stay with the team through their college careers, but that's just not, I mean, just like the old days where people played 4 years in basketball, they don't do that anymore. So now it's the world we created, and so this kind of what we're stuck with and have to deal with. So like it or not, that's the way it is. Good for them if that means they can make a little more money on NIL, which I can't imagine they could make a whole lot at Idaho, but maybe at a Power 5 school or a bigger school they can. So, good for them, bad for the team they leave behind.
Yeah, I think that college basketball reference was a really good comparison where it kind of takes a little of the tradition away, a little of that history of the sport, guys playing 4 years with the same team, building a legacy. It's more like you have a big year, you might just leap. So, yeah, it's a little bit different for sure. Fritz, your thoughts on the portal? I think there's a lot of good and a lot of bad that are coming from it. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Like Mark said, good for the player, bad for the fan. But your thoughts on it, Fritz?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's a more the most equal thing to do at this level. I mean, coaches hit the portal all the time and leave the players they recruited. That's the way it used to work. So now the coaches have to adjust to the portal. I don't think Bobby Hawk is happy about it, but I think he adjusted pretty well. He's got a quarterback that he grabbed off the portal that's got another year left if he chooses after this season in Clifton McDowell. And, I don't know where they'd be without him because he's been steady. I thought his play of the game was the fumble he recovered. I just I think in a couple of years it might settle down. I also like what Chip Kelly said this week about having a commissioner that oversaw Division I football, get rid of conference commissioners, keep things regional. Just kind of, it just kind of got out of hand. I think, first of all, at the FBS level, where teams could just leave their conference for more money in another conference. I think something has to change there. And when that does, I think it could trickle down to the FCS level. Well, there's some good Griz players that I wonder if we'll see around because there's a 4-day window after the title game from the 8th to the 11th, I believe, of January. So I imagine I'll be covering a game one day and writing different stories the next couple of days because you know what? Number 5 probably looks awful good to some Pac-12 or former Pac-12 schools, among others.
Yeah, that was one of the first players that came to my mind as well. You wonder what's going to happen after the championship game with a guy like Bergen after the run he's had. I think you kind of said it. Maybe in a few years it settles down. It really has a wild, wild west kind of feel. I know it's all new. I think I'm big on the idea of the athletes having the freedom to move around, but there definitely needs to be some kind of balance to it all because it's just been tough for college football fans. We had a basketball reference. I'll drop kind of like a baseball reference, but feels kind of like the Big Sky and a lot of these FCS. They're almost like the farm system now. It's like you go there, hey, you might get called up to the big time, and that's what everyone's looking for is the call up rather than, hey, go out and play 4 years and, get your education, yada, yada, yada. So it just changed a lot. I just think from the fan perspective, it's tough, but for a player, you got to chase the opportunity. I can understand that. I like that you mentioned McDowell. I was going to say, as much as it does hurt FCS schools, there's a lot of FCS guys who have dropped back from the FBS the last few years and made a big impact, McDowell being one. I know Chris Walker was a Nebraska guy on the Griz. So there is a lot of talent that has come back to the level. I think, like you kind of mentioned, maybe slows down in a few years, but definitely tough when you mention – I keep thinking of the Vandals, just tough. You have this special core. You got a head coach, an Eck, and it feels like you're building something. All of a sudden, it's like, time to retool. Let's do this all over again. And that's where it really feels like the one and done in college basketball, where it's like every year you don't know who your starting five is in college hoops. Now in college football, you don't know who your quarterback's going to be year in and year out. Even a guy like Caleb Williams in Oklahoma goes to USC. So I won't go on a rant, but it's just changed a lot of the complexion, double-edged sword, good for the players. But at the same time, you gotta find some balance for sure. You don't want to see it get to the point where it's like a couple schools have all the money, so they get all the good guys. They'll turn into the Yankees of baseball, and now the Dodgers, whatever you want to say. But that's what it feels like it's trending towards, and I don't think anybody wants to have that happen. So after the transfer portal talk now, we'll get to a little championship game action real quick. Let's get to a word from our friends at M C Tire and Kalispell, and then we'll get your guys' thoughts on the South Dakota State and Montana championship matchup.
M C Tire in Kalispell has been locally owned since 1979. From urban avenues to untamed trails, M C Tire will help you conquer any terrain. Unleash the power within your ride. M C Tire, wherever you go, we've got you covered.
Thanks again to M C Tire and Kalispell. So let's get into the game here. Montana opens as a 12.5-point underdog, and the over for the game, is 50.5 points. So despite two of the best defenses in the country, odds makers are expecting a decent amount of points. I want to get your guys' initial thoughts on kind of some of the betting numbers there and just reaction to this matchup, and then we'll kind of go into a more in-depth preview January 2nd. But just your guys' initial thoughts. We'll start with you, Mark, and then we'll get to you, Fritz.
Well, I guess part of it would be in theory, the weather shouldn't be a factor down there, so that shouldn't be a problem. I don't think South Dakota State will cover it on its own. It shouldn't be 59-0 like their last game. I've talked to some people that have seen South Dakota State up close, and they think Montana's got the team that can play with them. They're big and physical. They're very balanced. Got a great defense. They got that number 5 for as long as he's there, and they got a balanced offense. So I think, obviously South Dakota State's the favorite, but Montana's got all the tools to pull the quote unquote upset.
Yeah, it's going to be a well-balanced matchup. I feel like both these teams are so fundamentally sound, well-coached. So there's a lot of comparisons between these two team styles. Fritz, kind of your initial reaction to this matchup as we gear up for some exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that the Jackrabbits are favored. This will be the third straight game where the Griz play just a truly outstanding quarterback. This guy's name is Mark Gronowski. He was there when they did the spring season and got hurt in the title game. Came back last year and was just nails as they marched on to their first ever national title. And he's back this year. He's just a great player. I think it's encouraging, or counts on the Montana ledger, that the last two quarterbacks that came into Washington Griz really had a low completion percentage. And I think that's an important trend to follow. I just happened to take a peek at a betting kiosk today. The Griz are plus 375, which means if you bet $100, you'd win 375. I don't know if I want that action, but I'd say take the points. I think it'll be a close game. I think the Griz will give themselves a shot.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think Montana's built for this type of football. They've played in some ugly games. They've blown some teams out. They've played in some really close games in the playoffs. They're prepared for this. South Dakota State is equally prepared. They're a great program right now. I think a big matchup to watch early. Isaiah Davis of the Jackrabbits, star running back. He had 1,500 yards this year, 17 touchdowns already. So if they can slow him down, that's because the front line of the Griz versus Davis and that offensive line, that's going to be really key. It feels like every time I watch South Dakota State, that guy gets loose for a big run, and that's what you really got to prevent. One other big takeaway reaction to this one is sometimes in sports, you don't always see the best two teams meet for a championship. I will say this year, it feels like these are the two best teams in the country. They both proved it to get here. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, and I just think it's awesome that we're actually going to see the 1 and 2 seed go head-to-head, neutral field. So I think that serves Montana. You wouldn't want to play this one on the road. Other big takeaway, just because earlier in the year we talked a little bit about, is the Big Sky, one of the best conferences in the country? Are they right there with the Missouri Valley? I think this is kind of the Big Sky re-solidifying themselves as a top-tier program from their conference. From 2010 to 2020, they had two teams make the national title game. Now it's going to be two teams in the last 3 years. So all of a sudden they're right back. The Griz are doing their thing. Montana State's had success. Idaho made a playoff run. It just kind of shows the level of football being played in the Big Sky, and it comes down to the best two conferences in the country squaring off with the two best teams in the country. So it just worked out, where a lot of time in sports you get kind of a lopsided matchup in the postseason, whatever it may be. It just feels like it's going to be a great game. And yeah, I would definitely expect this one to be a lot closer than 12 points. And I don't expect to see a lot of points on the board. I think it's going to be a dogfight. I guess we'll wrap this thing up with, I just wanted to ask your guys kind of thoughts on what it means for the Big Sky. Just kind of mentioned their kind of return to the top of the FCS a bit. A couple big time programs have left the FCS, so it's opened the door for them even more. So your thoughts on it, Fritz, and then we'll get to you, Mark, and wrap this thing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a good news for the Big Sky to get a team back in there. Second time in 3 years. 2 years ago it was MSU taking on North Dakota State. I think Montana travels well. They always have. I think they'll travel extremely well for this game down in Frisco, and I'm looking forward to it. I think the Big Sky has kind of finally risen back up, and I think a lot of it has to do with Bobby Hauck being able to build the Grizzlies back. I'm pretty sure he probably had a 5-year plan. 2 years ago, he had a really good team, and they were pretty banged up when they lost to James Madison. Last year, they were got chewed up by their in-league schedule. And this year, they just started getting momentum with that. After that NEU loss, he just started building and building. And it's year 6 for Bobby Hauck. That's what his whole goal was, to get him back to this level. And they're dragging the Big Sky with them. The Cats are really good, have been good, will continue to be good. It's so great having Idaho good again. So, yeah, welcome back, Big Sky.
Yeah, no, it feels like it. I really like that. Well said, Fritz. Welcome back. No, for sure. Mark, your thoughts on that, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I mean, for years, someone's watched this conference for years and years and years. When you think of the Big Sky, Montana is the first team that comes to mind. I mean, they are the blue blood of the Big Sky. I mean, the other ones, Montana State's come along lately, and Eastern's had its time, but Montana is the team. When probably if you ask people nationwide, they might not be able to name a lot of teams in the Big Sky, but they would know Montana, the Griz and the stadium and all that stuff. So to see them in the title game is nice, and even nicer, they're one of the two best teams. Like you said, Josh, they actually are one of the two best teams. They are playing like it, and so they deserve it, and it wouldn't be surprising for them to win. Thank goodness they made that quarterback decision that they made after the third or fourth game, and gave it to Clifton McDowell. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them.
Yeah, talk about a tale of 2 seasons for Montana. You mentioned Coach Bobby Hauck. He deserves a lot of credit. We joked on the show throughout the season, but there was rumors he was going to get fired, and here we are. Now they're in the championship game, back at it. Montana's kind of back where they used to be. I know, I think I don't want to make the comparison, but you think of the SEC, you think of Bama a little, you think of Pac-12, you think USC. Certain schools, when they're at the top, it makes the whole conference better because everyone else has to ramp it up a little bit. So no, it's been a heck of a year, and definitely looking forward to previewing this championship game more. January 2nd, you guys will take next week off on the panel. You guys have great holidays and all that. Really enjoy everybody listening. Have a great holidays. Thank you for checking out the show all year long. So it's been a lot of fun. And like I said, January 2nd, we'll get back at it and get you guys ready for the championship game, because it'll be coming up quick. So that'll do it for this week's show. Thanks again to M C Tires in Kalispell.